Chapter 1346. The moment the thought entered their minds, a loud click came from the screen. Theo's tank had a stun effect. With a swing of his hammer, Bojo froze on the spot. Everyone who played the game knew that control was the most important thing for an assassin. If she was controlled, she wouldn't be able to escape. Besides, there was a tank and a long-range attack. After the signal to attack, the opponent's sorcerer had rushed over to provide support. In an instant, Spade Z's HP dropped by half. She didn't even need to fight in the wilderness. Theo's assassin seemed to have been waiting for this moment. He raised his long spear and leaped in, intending to deal all the damage to her. Right at this moment, Bojo moved her right hand. Bojo sat in front of the screen and moved her right hand. The mouse glowed and everyone could see the lines that appeared in that instant. She moved with agility, avoiding the big move. Theo's assassin missed his target. But even so, Spade Z was still in a dangerous situation. Moreover, under normal circumstances, as an assassin, when fighting in a high-level match, he should be prepared in advance to see if the other party would come over to attack him. Not only had they been robbed, but they had also been forced into such a corner by Theo. Some started to wonder if Spade Z's abilities had deteriorated. Her mana has been snatched and she's suffering from the start. Spade Z's maneuvers just now are too average. Some of the audience, who already thought Bojo was a drama queen, seized the opportunity to mock her. With such skills, she can't lead a team. Since she left, she shouldn't have come back. Seriously, the tickets are a waste. I don't want to watch such a boring match. Unlike the audience, the fans were really anxious. They leaned forward, worried for Bojo. On the screen, her HP was getting lower and lower. It can't be. Was Spade Z, the FC King, going to sacrifice the first HP in the team battle? Spade Z's fans are going to be slapped in the face. Everyone's attention was focused on the magnified screen. The director had also focused on the main scene. Since Spade Z was the focus of everyone's attention, it would be more exciting to watch the match from her point of view. Hence, the discussion grew louder. Even the bullet screen was filled with comments. After all, this was the scene being broadcasted. But soon enough, the veteran esports fans noticed a problem. Why wasn't anyone helping Spade Z? Supreme Alliance wasn't at this level. Even if Shui Yao Yao was a newbie and didn't know how to support. But what about the others? Was this Spade Z's commanding skills? You don't even send a signal when you encounter a problem. Isn't he a little too arrogant? It seemed like Spade Z was only suited for individual battles and wasn't suited for team battles. It was a pity that Rao Rong had already represented Supreme Alliance during the 1v1. If Rao Rong had been the commander, the outcome might have been different. Just as this thought popped up in everyone's mind, they felt that Supreme Alliance's jungler was about to collapse. Suddenly, a sound effect appeared on the screen. KO. The first blood. Strange. On the screen, Spade Z wasn't dead. Then why would there be such a sound effect? All of a sudden, everyone was puzzled and perplexed. They didn't understand what was going on. Soon, the big screen gave the answer. It was the support on the other side of Theo who was only planning to reinforce the troops. Heavens! It wasn't just the audience that was in disbelief. Even Theo's captain was shocked. How did this happen? In an instant, the situation turned chaotic. Bojo, who was sitting in front of the computer, slid her right hand and moved nimbly. She retreated to the bottom of the turret with a low amount of HP, just in time to feed herself a blood pack. But this was not the point. The point was that people could clearly hear the 3 words spitting out from her thin lips, "All right, retreat." The next second, the bullet screen went crazy. F***ck, what exactly is going on? Please explain. I can't believe my ears, was my big spade giving an order? The netizens weren't the only ones who had this question, even the audience was confused. When the replay was shown, the audience realized that Spade Z hadn't been caught in the jungle. That was when they realized that Spade Z hadn't been ambushed. Instead, she had sensed the opponent's intentions beforehand and had sent a signal to the entire team to attack Theo's support. Hence, when the opponent had come to their jungle, she hadn't reacted on purpose. She had wanted Theo to take the bait and assume that she had been controlled. That way, they would focus on killing her or guarding against reinforcements. However, they hadn't expected that they would be hiding in the bushes to ambush the support. F***ck, this trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain is too good. She didn't just take the first HP, the entire jungle on Theo's right is empty. My almighty Z is telling the opponent that if he dares to use his blue, I'll get my teammate to take the first HP and clear his entire jungle. That's amazing. It was indeed unexpected. No one had expected such an outcome. If one thought about it carefully, one would realize that such a plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain was not something that just anyone could pull off. Firstly, one had to be clear of the opponent's intentions and make a certain level of judgment. Next, one had to have precise positioning to ensure that one would be able to buy time for one's teammate and ensure that one wouldn't die. It was a difficult feat that not many could pull off. It's so cool. That was so cool. The people who had been mocking her kept their mouths shut after witnessing this scene. They were clear on one point. It wasn't that Spade Z's fans had been slapped in the face, but they had been too biased. This seems to be the first time Spade Z has used such a method to start a match. The shoutcaster was a professional. It's novel and impressive. The other person chuckled. Indeed, I'm not sure if you have noticed, but she has completely adapted to her role as a team leader. Using such a method to take the first HP is in consideration of the overall situation. She is now an assassin and also a team controller. I don't know why, but I can see Chin Mo's shadow in her. Honestly, if I were to participate in a match now, they would be the opponents I wouldn't want to face. They are too strong, be it individual battles or assisting the team. In the past, Spade Z's advantage in this aspect hadn't been revealed yet. I reckon Theo's side wouldn't have expected her to use such a method, using herself as bait to allow the team to take the first HP. This is completely different from the way she used to sweep the opponent's jungle alone. It wasn't just different, it was a huge blow to Theo's head. But this alone wasn't enough to secure victory. After all, Theo's skills were obvious. But it had to be said that the mistaken strategy was a huge blow to them. They couldn't stay in Supreme Alliance's jungle any longer. One of the towers in the bottom lane had been destroyed and they had to return quickly. Shui Yao Yao from Supreme Alliance's middle lane and the experienced Yun who had already gathered over. Hence, they had to flee. Right at this moment, the figure that was supposed to be under the tower suddenly darted over. She cut off the back line sorcerer that was trying to retreat. K.O. Dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbfounded. They hadn't expected Spade Z to rush out with less than half of her HP. Wasn't she courting death? Even if she killed someone, she wouldn't be able to escape. Theo's reaction was swift. Just as he was about to destroy the other party, the figure held a wine flask and with a flash of her sword, she was back under the tower. First skill, displacement. F***ck, that maneuver is amazing. That's the true meaning of first blood. Is my big spade learning from Almighty Chin? He retreated instantly after killing someone. The crowd was getting out of control. They had never seen it before. In the Asian Cup, China had never achieved such an amazing result. This time, even some of the haters were silenced. They couldn't be haters. Her maneuvers were too heaven-defying. The atmosphere on Theo's side was starting to change. They had assumed that with the information they had, they could deal with Supreme Alliance. It was the same even if Spade Z was around. But now, they realized that the information they had was just information. Because when they truly competed against Supreme Alliance, they would realize how fast they were growing. Moreover, Spade Z was an assassin that no one could predict when or how she would strike. A second ago, when they thought she wasn't fast enough, they realized she was just bait and wouldn't move recklessly. The next second, she dared to attack with half of her HP, using her recovery skill to kill someone. Theo was really feeling the pressure. Their captain changed his style as he turned to the side and said something to the rest of the team. It was obvious that Theo's strategy had changed. They started to play steadily, ensuring that their jungle resources weren't taken by Spade Z. Next, they took a kill in the middle lane, pulling the score from 2-0 to 2-1. Gradually, everyone began to fully immerse themselves in the match. They were evenly matched. That was the mood of the spectators. At this stage, it will depend on who is more skilled. Yu Cixin placed his hands behind his back, whistling devilishly before his voice deepened. But I'm curious why Qin Mo isn't participating in such a competition. Even if he lost his memory, he shouldn't be absent. Hoshino tilted his head. What are you trying to say? Chapter 1347. Their captain left. The rest of the Japanese would definitely follow. Watanabe watched Yu Cixin's back view before turning towards them. Vice Captain, you guys can leave first, I'll take a look. Hoshino lifted his thin lips, a smile that was hard to reject. The more Watanabe thought about it, the more interested his vice captain was in Spade Z. His interest was way out of line. There was no love in the esports industry. But judging from his vice captain's intentions, Watanabe shook his head, his expression unreadable. Hoshino didn't seem to mind the misunderstanding from his teammates, his gaze fixed on Bojo the entire time. The battle on the screen continued to be intense. But when the screen switched to Bojo, everyone saw her sharp reflexes, the numerous strategies she devised, the way she predicted Theo's movements and swiftly provided support. She didn't just command the battle, she would also cut the back line at the most crucial moment to take down the enemy. But Theo wasn't weak either, he never suffered any losses in the team battle. Spade Z took down one of their members. They only took one Supreme Alliance member. The team battle went on for more than 50 minutes. In the last match, Theo was still thinking about how to counter Bojo's predictions. Unexpectedly, this time, Bojo didn't make any predictions. Instead, she used her best play style, leaping in and taking down all the attackers, exchanging 1 for 3. After the explosive damage, Theo didn't have an ADC, sorcerer, or top laner. How was he going to continue? Supreme Alliance pushed forward, destroying Theo's Crystal City. The screen zoomed in. Everyone saw her removing her headphones, wearing a dress as she picked up a bottle of mineral water. They won. She wasn't just the assassin, she was also the leader of Supreme Alliance. Everyone knew very well that this last exchange of 1 for 3 was worth it. It was just like Almighty Qin's thinking. Soon, everyone's results appeared on the screen. Spade Z, the MVP of the match. Many Negroes were speechless at this moment. Other than Qin Mo, none of the other Chinese players had achieved such results. Spade Z was the first. Both inside and outside the stadium, there was a huge commotion. After 3 years, this was the closest the Chinese team was to the championship. The media couldn't hold it in any longer, wanting to interview Bojo the most. The audience cheered too. Other than Shui Yaoyao, no one knew how pale the person beside her was. Just now, when she was commanding the battle, her hand accidentally touched her. Shui Yaoyao froze at that moment because the body temperature was too high. It was so high that she was in a daze. Highness Jiu was having a fever. That was her first reaction. But before she could do anything, that person's voice came, "Don't leave the middle lane, Yaoyao, don't be distracted." Shui Yaoyao could only focus because she knew that the sooner the competition ended, the more rest he could get. Perhaps, other than this group of teammates, no one would know under what circumstances this battle command was completed. Looking at the increasing number of people, the man raised his head to drink water and lowered his arms. Shui Yaoyao stood in front of her. Bojiu knew she was running a fever since even her breath was hot. That was why she kept drinking water. When she saw Shui Yaoyao's actions, she smiled. "It's fine, I can handle it. Leave the media to Boss Feng." Shui Yaoyao took a moment before adding, "You can walk from the back, Coco will follow you." Coco didn't know what had happened. He was extremely happy after winning the competition, his face full of smiles. Shui Yaoyao had already sent Feng Yi a message. When Feng Yi saw it, he immediately gestured to his assistant and blocked the crowd that was approaching. "Friends from the media, I know everyone wants to get the first-hand interview information. Don't be anxious, there will be a chance, as long as everyone comes one by one." With that, he gestured behind him to lead her away. Shui Yaoyao didn't delay, blocking the crowd with Coco and taking the chance to bring Bojiu backstage to Supreme Alliance's lounge. Fever. Coco's handsome face was distorted. "How did you get a fever?" Bojiu didn't explain, she just smiled and opened the wardrobe, removing her uniform. She seemed to be taking Lin Feng's black down jacket. "No, little spade, you're burning up, where are you going?" Coco pressed her down, his face stern. "Don't go anywhere, wait for old Fox Feng to come over and take you to the hospital for an injection." Bojiu pushed his hand away. "It's just a small cold, I have something to do." "What do you have?" Coco looked as though he wouldn't let her go no matter what. What a joke, he could feel the heat through her clothes. "Where did you go yesterday? How did you end up like this?" Bojiu took another sip of water to clear her mind. "I didn't go anywhere." Actually, Coco knew something must have happened yesterday. At the start, Captain had said he was going to buy candies for Little Spade and then he disappeared. Little Spade had gone to look for Captain but hadn't returned the entire night. The next time she had appeared, she was alone. Coco didn't ask where Captain was because he was afraid it would upset Little Spade. But how did she end up like this? Could it be? "You didn't sleep the entire night?" Coco's eyes widened. Bojiu paused, but didn't reply. She reached for the black mask beside her, preparing to wear it so that she wouldn't be recognized. Coco watched her, knowing that his guess was right. His eyes widened but he didn't know that his guess was only half right. Bojiu hadn't slept the entire night, she had stood downstairs for an hour so that he could see her. In order to prevent any blemishes from the competition, she had worn a long dress that wasn't warm at all. Perhaps, no one would ever be able to see her good intentions. Only friends could empathize with her. Shui Yaoyao stood at the side, lifting her face. She was afraid she would cry because her heart was really aching. Coco wanted to call Feng Yi because he was the only one who could persuade Little Spade to go for the injection. But when that person reached out and held onto his wrist, saying, "Coco, I have to go now, I have to go to Brother Mo's place before I lose him again." He couldn't make the call no matter how hard he tried. He knew he shouldn't stop her. Bojiu smiled. With the mask on, only her dark eyes could be seen. The long black down jacket covered her figure perfectly. She wasn't acting out a drama, Bojiu knew she had to get better. But the more she walked, the heavier her breathing became. It was only when she stopped that she realized her body couldn't handle the high fever. Gradually, the voices in his ears became indistinct. All he could hear was more and more noise, as if the media had barged in. At this moment, she heard a voice from the other side. Hoshino. It's Hoshino, why is he here? Hoshino glanced at them, reaching over with one hand, silently tossing a bottle of medicine over. Bojo caught it, watching as he stood there, intentionally shielding her. She turned and walked towards the emergency exit. The media wasn't aware of her action since Hoshino was a hot topic, all their attention was on his face. Hoshino smiled faintly as he answered the reporter's questions. When Feng-yi walked over, he nodded, stuffing a hand into his pocket, brushing past him. Feng-yi was a smart man, he could tell with one look that Hoshino had taken over his job. The two of them walked towards the lounge together. When there was no one around, Feng-yi said, "Thank you." Hoshino paused, breaking into a smile. "It's nothing. From the information I received, Hoshino isn't someone who would do such a small thing." Feng-yi was indeed the smiling prince. Hoshino was still as elegant as ever. "It seems like Boss Feng's information is wrong, I'm a caring person. Besides, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's competition, I wouldn't want my opponent to be held back by such trivial matters." Just an opponent. Feng-yi didn't beat around the bush, going straight to the point. Hoshino lifted his lips. "It seems like everyone knows I like C. That's right, she isn't just an opponent, she's my family." Family? Feng-yi didn't understand. He had assumed that Hoshino's actions were all because of love. But the moment he said the word family, Feng-yi wasn't sure. At the same time, in a building in the west of the city, Fan Jia started the countdown. There were 4 hours left. The person in front of her belonged to her. But there was something that made Fan Jia frown. Since this morning, he had been standing in front of the window without saying a word. No matter what she said, he would only reply with 1 or 2 words. Sometimes, he wouldn't even speak. Fan Jia hated this situation. The more she thought about it, the more she realized why he was standing there. Who was he looking at but didn't see? She clenched her fists, testing his reaction again. She could tell that he would do everything she said. Fan Jia was happy again. Just as she was about to leave, she saw him looking out of the window. There was actually a taxi parked there. The person who got out of the taxi was wearing a knee-length black down jacket. He raised his head and looked in their direction. Then he strolled over to the Lamborghini that he had never driven away before. Fan Jia didn't know it was her at first. But she noticed the glint in Qin Mo's eyes the moment she appeared. Fan Jia was really jealous. She was standing right in front of him. But he didn't even look at her. She had assumed that was his personality. But now, it seemed like it wasn't enough. Then she would end everything prematurely. Fan Jia's gaze darkened, meeting the figure outside the window. Bojo wasn't aware of the situation upstairs. She couldn't keep standing outside since she had to consider her health. Hence, her first reaction was to get into the car. When little Blackie heard her voice, he immediately said, "Master, your little vixen is still upstairs, she hasn't come down. Don't worry." Bojo felt much more at ease after reaching here. But now, she wasn't worried about the Almighty leaving. Instead, she was worried about the time. The time was getting closer and she couldn't think of a better way to help the Almighty regain his memory. Bojo tugged open her collar, leaned her head against the steering wheel and drank a fever pill. But even then, the AI system in the car detected her high body temperature. Little Blackie's voice rang again. "Master, the report shows that your stamina has reached its limit. As the Fifth Avenue's racing god, I have to use my professional knowledge to inform you that you need treatment." "Oh, why isn't Grandfather Butler around?" "If he was around, he wouldn't allow you to act so recklessly." Bojo didn't reply, maintaining her position. Little Blackie started to panic, flashing its lights continuously so that someone could see it. It was sending a signal. Upstairs, Chin Mo stood in front of the window. He had thought that after that person appeared, he would soon see that face that made him feel peaceful for some reason. 5 minutes passed, but she was still in the car. Chin Mo tapped the side of his long legs, feeling uneasy. He wanted to head downstairs. Fan Jia noticed the change in his emotions, chuckling lightly. "Brother Mo, where are you going? Who's going to protect me after you leave? They are still watching me. The moment you leave, I don't know if there will be snipers shooting." These words were indeed effective. Because Chin Mo had one hand in his pocket, and he stopped there. But his heart and actions were far apart. It would definitely hurt. The moment Chin Mo paused, his chest felt as though it was being torn apart. He leaned against the wall, his fingers gripping the amulet, as though that was the only way to alleviate the pain. Seeing this, Fan Jia wanted to take the chance to take the amulet away. She hated this amulet to the core. Besides, this was Chin Mo's weakest moment. The last thing he relied on was gone. He probably wouldn't be paying attention to Z like before. With this thought in mind, Fan Jia reached her hand out and added a voice message. "Brother Mo, are you feeling unwell? I know this is a gift from me and it's very important. I'll keep it safe for you. You'll break it." Chin Mo's eyes turned bloodshot. He wanted to move his hand several times, but there was always a voice telling him not to hurt the person in front of him, to protect her. That voice was like a curse, imprinting itself in his mind. Fan Jia saw this and knew that the last step of the hypnosis was about to be completed. She smiled, wanting to take the amulet away. But just at the moment when she let his hand leave the amulet, he was shocked. She didn't know why his hand was raised. There was a tearing sound. Chapter 1348. When she had heard the tearing sound, Fan Jia had been secretly delighted. She had finally gotten rid of this thing. But when she saw the thing on the ground, her expression changed. It was a photo. The photo should have been taken with a Polaroid. The colors were bright. In the photo, the sun was shining brightly. A little girl wearing a tiger costume was pouncing towards a little boy. She was smiling beautifully, as though she had been dipped in sugar. The little boy was very cold, and his expression was hard to describe. However, he reached out and held the little girl's waist, as if he was afraid that she would touch him, or afraid that she would fall on her own. Even the corners of his mouth were slightly pursed, but it was not because he hated her, but because he felt a little helpless. His eyes were filled with tenderness. It was easy to think of an ancient Chinese poem. The first time a concubine's hair touched her forehead, the drama of folding flowers in front of the door. Her husband rode a bamboo horse, circling the bed to play with green plums. In reality, this wasn't the main point of the photo. Under the photo, there was a beautiful sentence written in block letters. "If God exists, I hope this idiot wearing a tiger costume can live a peaceful and happy life." So this amulet, from the day he had gotten it, hadn't been for him to pray for his own blessings. All these years, the treasure he had kept with him was for another person's blessings. In that instant, Fan Jia was filled with hatred. Her first reaction was to destroy the photo. But that slender, fair hand was one step ahead of her, pressing down on the photo, allowing her to raise her leg and step on his index finger. Fan Jia had used a lot of strength. It was impossible for it not to hurt, but Chin Mo didn't even blink. His handsome side profile was still in the dim light. It was as though the little girl in the photo was the only thing left in his eyes. His fingers slid down the tiger hat on her head, and something in his heart seemed to melt. He could almost hear the sound of a lock being unlocked. He was most afraid of losing this person. The scene in the photo seemed to have been imbued with a sense of perspective. Scene after scene, it flashed across his mind. She pounced over and hugged him. "Momo, how much for a kilo? I'll buy you." She refused to go home and sleep, hugging her little keyboard. "This is my favorite toy, I'll give it to you. Let me sleep for one night, just one night." She was very obedient when she laid on his bed. It was hard to imagine that someone as troublesome as her would be obedient. She would always lean over in the end. "If I hug you, you won't want to go back to China anymore." "Yeah, what I mean is, you don't have to miss home so much." He had fallen sick, but even his grandfather hadn't noticed. She was the only one who had hugged him. She didn't cry and went to look for the family doctor. After he caught a cold, he was afraid that she would be infected, so he deliberately placed a lot of flower pots by the window to prevent her from coming again. However, even the gods could not stop the little tiger. She had to climb in with a black face. She spent a lot of effort to educate him. "You can't treat your little friend like this." She found all sorts of reasons to sleep with him. Every time they ate, she would give him what he liked. Whatever he liked, he would definitely see her bring it over the next day. Even though her grandfather didn't know what he was interested in, she knew it clearly. The way she smiled, the way her eyes turned red, the way she would press him against the wall after she grew up, the way her lips curved slightly. She had never been anyone. She had always been that idiot who had treated him as a girl. Fan Jia sensed his abnormality. She wanted to speak, trying to use words to hypnotize him. But what she didn't expect was that before she could open her mouth. Swoosh! A poker card flew over, cutting her face sharply. Fan Jia's face turned pale. She watched as the person stood up slowly with the photo. Even her eyes were trembling. She couldn't believe it. No one could decipher the hypnosis. This was impossible, absolutely impossible. But the coldness emitted from the man made Fan Jia truly feel fear. The poker card in his fingertips slashed at her again. This time, it cut her wrist. Fan Jia had never been so close to death. She could tell that he really wanted to kill her. The moment he walked out of the light, Fan Jia knew that she was doomed. That wasn't the gaze of someone who was controlled by hypnosis. Instead, he used to be cold, aloof, and aloof. Fan Jia took a few steps back. To her, he wasn't a god, but a devil. The way he looked at her did not have a single trace of warmth. It was as cold as when he had first exposed her. His indifferent tone was as cold as when he had first exposed her. "You want to imitate her?" That time, Fan Jia had almost been unable to escape. Because of that, she hated Z even more. She had thought of many ways to kill her. But that person had always been like this, haunting her like a ghost. Fan Jia gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. "I did everything because I like you. Why can't you pity me?" Qin Mo's voice was calm. "After killing someone and snatching their things, you still say you are pitiful. Heh, why should I give my pity to someone who isn't even comparable to a beast?" Fan Jia reached out and covered her ears. "I just like you, I just like you. How can you say that? Do you want to say that you are innocent?" Qin Mo rotated the poker card in his hand slowly. Fan Jia raised her hand. "Am I wrong? You can go to hell and ask those who died because of you. Aren't they all innocent?" Qin Mo moved. The sound of another poker card rang out. Fan Jia's other wrist was also cut. She suddenly realized that both her hands were going to be crippled. "How can you be so ruthless?" Fan Jia's face twisted. "Why don't you just kill me?" Qin Mo lifted his eyelids. "My hands are only for killing. You aren't worthy." When Fan Jia heard the last sentence, she seemed to have gone crazy. But right at this moment, Chin Mo gestured towards the outside. A group of plainclothes policemen rushed in from the outside. He reached out and pressed her down. Fan Jia struggled. Kill me if you can, kill me. Life in prison suits you better than if I kill you. Chin Mo glanced sideways, his eyes cold. Don't worry, you won't die and you won't come out. Don't you like to drown? Try it in prison. Fan Jia's expression changed. She understood what he meant. He wanted her to experience death every day. He had crippled her arms so that she wouldn't be able to fight back in prison. What kind of place was prison? It was a place where people were eaten without spitting out the bones. Fan Jia must have cried too much. One of the plainclothes men shook his head. That's quite pitiful. Chin Mo tilted his head and glanced over. Do you find her pitiful? I just think that the murderer is pitiful. Since she is already dead, why should she pay with her life? Do you know the difference between humans and beasts? Humans have hearts and understand why the spirits in heaven feel uneasy. They also understand what it means to repay a debt of blood with blood. If you really find her pitiful, let me give you my blessings. I hope that no one will avenge you when the person closest to you is thrown into the sea. The plainclothes man glared, turning to retort. However, he realized that the person was dressed in a military uniform. It was young Master Tang. It was young Master Tang, smiling brightly as usual. I didn't know. Nowadays, people in the system take the victim's place and say that the murderer is pitiful. Fan Jia has killed many people, including our comrades. If you are worried about her life in prison, you can pack your things and move to prison. You can still take care of her. Isn't that great? The plainclothes man froze. When he saw that the side profile didn't look like he was joking, cold sweat drenched his entire back. Chin Mo stood in front of young Master Tang. Both of them were tall and slender, but one of them was in a military uniform while the other was in a trench coat. Their styles were completely different. In front of them, Fan Jia's methods couldn't be used at all. I have something on. Chin Mo glanced up, speaking to young Master Tang. I can't go back with you. He knew it. Young Master Tang reached out, caressing his temples. How many days? After the Asian Cup. Chin Mo's voice didn't change. Young Master Tang arched a brow. You know I'm in charge of this case. If it had been someone else, he wouldn't have reacted in such a manner. Who else would want to arrest me other than you? Chin Mo's tone sounded as though he was talking about the weather. Young Master Tang laughed. Young Master Chin, you are mistaken. Do I look like someone who would kick someone when they are down? Chin Mo was nonchalant, but his gaze was fixed on young Master Tang. Young Master Tang seems to have misunderstood yourself. His gaze didn't escape young Master Tang's eyes. Besides, Chin Mo didn't intend to hide it. Forget it, just treat it as my gift to Z's dowry. Young Master Tang moved to the left and opened up a path. At the same time, the plainclothes officers also put away their guns. Fan Jia didn't want to be locked up in jail, she would rather die. But there was always reincarnation. Just like what young Master Tang had said, someone had to do something for the souls who had died unjustly, for those who had their possessions taken away, to receive justice. Of course, selfish people would always find excuses for themselves. They would distort the truth and lie. When they were young, they would claim other people's possessions as their own in order to gain attention. When they grew up, they could live with a clear conscience even after causing someone's death. Anyway, they would be forgiven after a long time. Anyway, there would be a whole bunch of people who would offend them. But similarly, in this world, there would always be a group of people who knew to be in awe. Just like what Mandela had said, if the sky was dark, they would survive in the dark. If they didn't have the strength to shine, they would curl up in the corner. Don't defend the darkness just because you are used to it. Don't be proud of yourself. Don't mock those who are braver and more passionate than you. We can be as lowly as dust but not as twisted as maggots. The sky would always brighten, no matter how dark it used to be. In the past, Bojo wouldn't have believed this. Because when she was alone, it was too hard. No one could understand what she was saying, much less understand why she was disappointed. But in the end, there would always be someone who would hug her gently when she was sad, asking her in a low voice, "Are you an idiot?" Bojo felt that she would never be able to find such a person, so venomous and gentle. She had thought about it many times. A pure white person couldn't be a light source. Because they were too weak, they couldn't withstand the slightest wave. Unlike that person, who was like the Kunlun Mountains. Not only could he light up the lights, but he could also create the shadows of the sun and moon. Hence, she liked him so much. Bojo knew that she was losing consciousness. She leaned her head against the steering wheel, feeling a little angry. Just as she was about to move, she realized that the car door had been pulled open. The next moment, there was a slightly cold embrace. Bojo couldn't open her eyes, but her nose worked. The familiar peppermint and tobacco scent made her feel that she was in a daze from the fever. That was why she had the illusion of being hugged. Or perhaps she missed someone too much. That was what Bojo told herself. Her forehead was pressed against a slightly cold object. The next moment, he hugged her tighter. Before she could figure out what was going on, a familiar voice came from beside her ear. A familiar voice entered her ears. "Little Bojo." "MH." He was calling her name. "Are you an idiot?" Chinemo was angry at himself. Since he had regained his memory, of course he knew why she had such a high fever. He leaned forward and touched her forehead. His chest felt like it was being burned by the temperature. Bojo frowned. She didn't want to be called an idiot when she was sick. Besides, was it really the Almighty? No matter how she thought about it, it didn't seem possible. With that thought in mind, she wanted to move. However, someone was one step ahead of her and pressed her hand down, trapping her in a warm embrace. As if afraid that she would be frozen, the person pulled her hand and stuffed it into his clothes. Her palm was pressed against his skin, and her fingertips were no longer cold. Bojo didn't see his face. She didn't know that the high and mighty young Master Chin was using such a method to warm her up. The only person who knew was the Lamborghini, Little Blackie. It really couldn't see anymore. What surprised it was that the devil usually looked cold and didn't smell like a human. He actually used such a method to warm up his master. It must be cold outside. He grabbed her hand and stuffed it into his clothes. It was to make his master feel better. F***ck, even it believed that the devil had true love for its master. It was indeed true love. Because faintly, there was a soft, faint voice. "I'm sorry." Chapter 1349. It was hard to imagine the almighty devil apologizing. Little Black felt that it was frightened. The intelligent system's ripples were a little shaky. "Little Blackie." Suddenly, he was called. The car paused, pretending to be unresponsive. Chinemo reached over and placed Bojo on the passenger seat. He held the steering wheel with one hand and arched a brow. "Are you intending for me to pour a bucket of water on your car?" Little Blackie couldn't pretend anymore. He turned on the lights immediately. Chinmo's voice was calm. "Find the nearest hospital. Lock onto the hospital now, straight line distance." Before Little Blackie could finish his sentence, the Lamborghini sped towards the asphalt road like the wind. It was uncomfortable to have a fever. Especially the joints like the knee, it was especially sore. The fever spread from the inside out. She felt cold and hot all over. Bojo's consciousness wasn't clear. The Lamborghini didn't stop at a large hospital. It wasn't dark yet and there would definitely be a lot of people. It was a clean and large clinic in a small district. It looked high-end and the equipment was complete. But at this hour, it was either a child or an elderly person. It was rare to see someone carrying a person in. But probably because of Chin Mo's height, the person in his arms didn't seem sick. Instead, she seemed to be asleep, wrapped in his jacket. The medical staff couldn't help but glance over. After all, they might see handsome people occasionally, but this was the first time they saw someone with such an aura. He was cold and aloof, but he was very polite. But what was surprising was that ever since he entered, he hadn't put the person in his arms down. He even took the thermometer from the nurse and turned to take the youngster's temperature. 39 degrees, the fever is quite severe. The nurse glanced at the thermometer. It's best to do a blood test to see if there's any inflammation. MMH, Chin Mo replied. He carried Bojo and walked to the window on the second floor. During the blood test, he had to give her an injection. But Bojo refused to extend her hand. Chin Mo looked at her furrowed brows, kissed her palm, and said, "Be good." That familiar voice probably had an effect. Bojo loosened her grip and the blood test was successful. The nurse took a look and said, "He needs an intravenous drip. The patient has a history of asthma. Is there any medicine for allergies?" "No," Chin Mo replied, not forgetting to place his hand on Bojo's forehead as though he knew it would make her feel better. When the nurse saw this scene, she really wanted to take a picture of it and send it to her boyfriend so that he could take a good look at it. When dealing with handsome people, the nurse's tone would definitely be very good. "Your bed number is 0271. Here is the doctor's prescription list. I'll go over after I'm done." Chin Mo thanked her. His back view was still so captivating that people couldn't help but stare. The medical staff all gathered together. "Who is this? You're not from this district, right? Why haven't I seen you before?" "I don't know. I think he's even more handsome than a celebrity. Too good-looking. It's a pity that he's already taken." It was not hard to hear the regret in his voice. Chin Mo acted as if he hadn't heard anything and walked into the ward. No matter how high-end a clinic was, it wouldn't have its own ward. There were 2 beds in one ward. The bed inside was already occupied. It was a little boy who was immersed in drinking yogurt. His mother was nowhere to be found. She was lying on the bed and receiving an intravenous drip. Chin Mo leaned over and placed the person in his arms on the other bed. Only then did the medical staff clearly see the face of the person he was holding. They were momentarily stunned. The face was so beautiful that it was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Because of the fever, there was a faint flush on her cheeks. It was rare to see such a beautiful woman when she was sick. However, they could still see that she was extremely uncomfortable. Her thin lips were slightly dry and her hair was stuck to her forehead. Her brows were still furrowed. The nurse brought the medicine over for the intravenous drip. She didn't understand why such a beautiful person wouldn't cooperate with the needle. Chin Mo saw it and turned his body, allowing Bojo to lean into his arms. Then he lifted the person's right hand. "Be good, you'll recover." The nurse was amazed. It wasn't her imagination. It seemed that the sick woman would only lower her guard in front of her boyfriend. However, she had been in the clinic for a long time and rarely saw such a patient boyfriend. Honestly, this was the first time she had seen such a patient. The little boy, who was also suffering from the flu, had been watching from the side. Coincidentally, his mother came in. He sat up straight and leaned over. Mom, that big brother's coaxing tone is similar to yours." The little boy's mother felt that her spoiled child was hopeless. She knew that the man beside her must have heard it. She turned her head and was about to smile apologetically. The person in his arms seemed to be very uncomfortable. She wanted to move the hand that was holding the intravenous drip. However, he held her down. His tone was calm, but it wasn't hard to hear the gentleness in it. "Are you uncomfortable? Bear with it for a while more, the infusion will be over soon." The little boy saw this and shook his head. "No, it's not the same. If I moved, you would have beaten me up." As a mother, she didn't know what to say. She coughed lightly. "Drink your yogurt." The little boy sighed. It was the same fever, but why was there such a huge difference? At first, he thought that this was already sad enough. Unexpectedly, the handsome big brother peeled a piece of candy and fed it to the patient in his arms. The little boy raised his head. "Mom, I want to eat candy too." His mother, who was accompanying him, suddenly felt helpless. Were all the young people in love like this? They were even more meticulous than her own child. Why didn't she find someone like this? Fortunately, the little boy was almost done with the infusion. It was just a short half an hour. The mother and son suffered a blow that they had never experienced before. The little boy glanced over. "Mom, I'm not a troublemaker. My dad never treated you like this when you were sick. Your dad is a heartless." The mother paused and laughed. "So you have to be nicer to your girlfriend in the future. Be like this big brother, understand?" The little boy nodded. He didn't understand. Why was the older sister in the big brother's arms the one who was sick, but the big brother was the one with an ugly expression? The mother and son left. Only Chin Mo and Bo Jio were left in the ward. The person in his arms hadn't woken up yet. Chin Mo didn't change his position. He held the paper cup with one hand, the rim of the cup against her lips. This was the scene that Terry, who had been by Chin Mo's side, saw when he came in with the things. When he had picked up the call, he hadn't dared to believe that it was really Boss Chin calling him. After all, he had received news that Boss Chin wouldn't be appearing in the near future and that something had happened. After hanging up, his first reaction was to inform Madam and Boss. Then, he went to the location that Boss Chin had designated with a bag of candy in his hand. This was the reason why Boss Chin had called him. He knew young Master Joe. Oh wait, it wasn't young Master Joe but Miss Joe who loved candy. He didn't have to think to know that Boss Chin wanted to give these candy to Miss Joe. But even so, when he saw the scene, he couldn't help but pause. After all, Boss Chin had never served anyone like this before. He seemed to be exuding a cold aura, but when he looked at the person in his arms, his gaze was filled with adoration. "Boss Chin, let me do it." As a special assistant, he had to be quick. Unexpectedly, before he could reach for the paper cup, the person in front of him had already taken a sip and leaned over to pass it to the person in his arms. It was as though he didn't exist in the room. Honestly, was he just a sugar bearer? When he realized that he might become a third wheel, the smart assistant placed the candy down and didn't say anything else. He closed the door and stood there, waiting for Boss Chin to buy something for him before entering. As a young man who was still single, he really didn't want to eat Boss Chin's dog food. The sky outside gradually darkened. 2 hours later, Bojio wanted to pull the blanket off her body due to the heat but was pressed down by a hand. It was slightly cold and comfortable. "There's still half a can left, we'll be done soon." That voice made Bojio realize that she wasn't dreaming and that the blurry vision she had had in the car was real. As well as the apology he had whispered into her ear. He was really back. Bojio opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the person's side profile. He was wearing a dark-colored sweater, his Adam's apple moving slightly under his long neck. His jawline was glowing. It was extremely familiar. Bojo reached out instinctively, grabbing onto his sleeve. This was something she had often done when she was young. Chinemo paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. His long, curly lashes fell, and his eyes were deep. Seeing that she had woken up, he didn't stop. Instead, he hooked her face, leaned over, and passed the water over again. Bojo was indeed thirsty. Before she could react, she received the kiss. The sweet warm water touched her lips, the faint fragrance of the man's arrogance passing over. It was slightly cold and soft, like touching ice cream. It melted in his mouth and tasted sweet. This was the feeling she had every time she kissed the Almighty. It was an addictive feeling. It was a pity that he wasn't kissing her, he was feeding her water. He left after a touch. Bojo was disappointed. Just as she was about to use her seduction skills, he opened his palm, revealing a pile of sweets. Pick one. Orange flavored. Bojo pointed at one of the sweets. She watched as his slender and fair hand peeled it open and fed it to her. After savoring the taste, she glanced up. Chapter 1350. Bojo didn't mind expressing her thoughts. I want to eat meat. Eat meat? Chinemo laughed, his eyes bright like aged wine. We'll talk about it when you're better. Bojo wanted to move. Chinemo reached out and pressed her down, turning to make a phone call. Not long after, the special assistant walked in from the outside, holding a beautiful takeaway box in his hand. What was disappointing was that they were all porridge. Bojo had been a carnivore since she was young. Porridge didn't feel anything. But she was indeed hungry, so she didn't care if she felt anything. Bojo wanted to eat by herself. His assistant was watching from the side, but Boss Chin was one step ahead, opening the takeaway box. He held the spoon in his hand, looking at Miss Jo with an arched brow. Open your mouth. Bojo realized that good-looking people would be a feast for the eyes when they fed others. The porridge was still hot. When it reached her mouth, the saltiness was just right and the texture was good. Bojo tilted her head to drink. When she was done, the drip was finished. Before she could stand up, he bent over and pulled her into his arms. It's cold outside. These 3 words were spoken in a very faint voice. Bojo could smell the fragrance on his body. She didn't pay attention to anything else. The sound of his heartbeat was too clear. The corners of his mouth curled up as he exerted more strength with his fingers. Chinemo glanced down at the person in his arms. Retract your face. Bojo didn't understand. His voice was still faint. You're too pretty, it's dazzling. When Chinemo said this, assistantly turned sideways to open the door. He coughed softly and held back his laughter. When Boss Chin fell in love, it was really hard to describe. The sky outside was dark. It was winter in Jiang City and the temperature had dropped to 0 degrees. When the wind blew over, it was exceptionally cold. But Bojo didn't feel anything. She knew that he was blocking the wind for her. Because when they were about to enter the car, she heard his voice. Why is the temperature still a little high? The fever wouldn't subside so quickly. Even within 4 drip, it would take a night to recover. Chinemo was an expert in psychology. He knew the basics of medicine. But for some reason, the moment he touched her warm body, he couldn't wait to lower the temperature. Bojo felt that this wasn't bad. In the past, she had been injured and sick. Come to think of it, he had only taken care of her like this when she was young. After that, she had become the young lord of the hacker world. There were many things that he had to face by himself. Even if he had a fever, he would be fine after a good night's sleep. How could it be like today, when there were people coaxing him. Bojo tilted her head and could see his neck. It was long and fair, giving off an aura of abstinence. Cold. He probably noticed her gaze. He lowered his eyes and kissed her eyes. "We'll be there soon." Bojo felt a sweetness in her heart. Her head was still burning. She didn't know that Chin Mo was recalling his childhood memories. She just felt a sense of familiarity rising in her heart, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It was probably because he had taken good care of her. Moreover, the Almighty actually didn't bring up her dark history when he lost his memory. From this point of view, having a fever wasn't bad either. Perfect. In the end, she was still too naive. The Almighty's next sentence was, "When we arrive, I want to hear how I fell in love with you at first sight and how I pursued you." Chapter 1351. Just one sentence from the Almighty. Bojo felt as though she had been tricked again. She really couldn't have a dark history. Especially in front of the Almighty. Most importantly, this Almighty was her boyfriend. When they were about to alight, he reached out to pinch her face, his brows arched, giving off a gentle impression. "Do you think you can escape by pretending to be asleep?" Bojo opened her eyes, but before she could speak, he wrapped her up with his jacket. It would be perfect if the Almighty didn't dig up her dark history instead of taking care of her. They weren't heading back to the Chin family's house but to her apartment. Grandfather Butler's expression darkened when he saw his young lord being carried back. But as a gentleman, he poured a cup of English black tea for his assistant. The assistant was stunned when he saw the old man in front of him. When did the Fu family hire such a butler? He thought he had a good aura, wearing a suit every day and helping Boss Chin settle all matters. If he claimed to be the second best assistant, no one would dare to do so. But this person in front of him wasn't just wearing a suit. More importantly, his clothes were spotless. Even the way he looked at his pocket watch was perfect. From the tea set to the pastry in his mouth, it was so exquisite that it shocked him. Such a beautiful thing definitely wouldn't taste good. With this thought in mind, the assistant placed a piece of pastry into his mouth casually. As a young man, he had been fed dog food for an entire day. Shouldn't he eat something to fill his stomach? How could it taste so good? The assistant's eyes widened in that instant. Looking at Grandpa Butler, who had been extremely elegant from the beginning to the end, he suddenly felt like he had lost. No wonder Boss Chin didn't bring Mischio back. The assistant wasn't aware of the other reason. Chin Mo knew that with Grandfather Butler's medical skills, it would definitely be good for her. Bojo was lying on the bed, accepting the Almighty's water. She was about to do something to distract the Almighty. It was better not to talk about how he had wooed her. Perhaps it was because of her dark history or the slight fever. Bojo's face was slightly red. To show that she was obedient, she sat down as if she had done something to redeem herself. She drank whatever Chin Mo fed her. Even though she didn't like to drink water usually, she drank half a cup in one go. Then, she looked at the desert god as if she was asking for praise. The desert god did not react. Bojo drank another half cup before looking up. The result was the same. "Looks like I can't escape." Bojo thought for a moment. If she didn't kiss and coax the Almighty, she would be able to get away with it. She didn't expect that before she could speak. He reached out and picked up a photo by the bedside. When he lowered his eyes, it was impossible to see any expression on his face. That picture had appeared in the castle before. Because of this photo, the cold aura emitted from the Almighty's body was still vivid in his mind. Instinctively, Bojo reached out and took the photo. She seemed to be muttering to herself and explaining, "Why is this photo here? It must be Grandpa Butler who did it." After saying that, he turned around, pulled out the drawer, and put the photo into it. Now that the Almighty had gotten rid of the hypnosis, he should be rather weak. She would tell him about the photo after he calmed down. As a domineering CEO, she had to be considerate. After Bojo put the photo away, she smiled at Chin Mo and leaned against him suavely. Chin Mo lowered his lids and looked at her casually. He fed her another mouthful of water. It's not surprising that you did it. After all, she is your childhood sweetheart. Bojo drank the water nervously. After swallowing, she coughed lightly. It really wasn't me. This time, the Almighty had indeed wronged her. She didn't have time to set up the photo. Ever since the hypnosis had been planted on the Almighty, Bojo had been thinking of ways to make him stay. Even though the Almighty had always called her Sugar Boy, Bojo could sense the playfulness behind it. It seemed as though he would leave once he lost interest. Of course, that was just her facade. But it was this facade. Bojo couldn't even coax little Princess Chin back then. Why would she take the photo out? Grandfather Butler was different. From a medical point of view, hypnosis would usually be related to memories that people weren't willing to face. Because they weren't willing to face it, it would create a psychological weakness and seal off certain things. Hence, Grandfather Butler would try any method to evoke Chin Mo's memory. Bojo understood this logic. But the Almighty's rejection of her, his childhood sweetheart, had been too obvious. Now that she had a dark history, she had to avoid these minefield topics. Chin Mo could read her thoughts. He lifted his thin lips and pulled the drawer open. Why? Do you think I'll be jealous? Why would you? Bojo laughed. Aren't you going to eat it? Chin Mo replied slowly, what's there to eat? Bojo. No matter how she thought about it, he didn't mean it. It was probably another trap. Bojo didn't want to fall for it. She wanted to create a topic to trap the Almighty. She pushed the drawer back. Brother Mo, after what you said, I thought about it. I agree that my childhood sweetheart is a little scheming. For example, he never allowed me to play with others. Now that I think about it, he might have been jealous. I was young back then and didn't understand it all. After she was done, she waited for the Almighty to agree with her point of view. After all, according to the Almighty's personality, not only would he agree to it, he would also calmly advise her to stay away from such people and so on. But why was he so quiet? Bojo watched as he peeled off the packaging, his fingers pausing. She arched a brow. She was about to eat. Why did the Almighty suddenly stop? Before she could figure it out, Chin Mo sat down. Chin Mo sat down, his thin lips slightly curved as he asked her, do you want to eat? The Almighty was tempting her with his beauty again. Bojo waited for him to feed her. Unexpectedly, the man smiled, raised his hand slightly, and threw the candy that was originally meant for her into the trash can beside him. Bojo, since you're having a fever, eat less sweet things. Chin Mo arched a brow. He exuded an aura of abstinence. What he said sounded very reasonable. But he had fed her a lot of candy previously. Bojo didn't know how she had offended him. She sat there in confusion. He turned and covered her with the blanket. His voice was calm. I heard that the purest feelings happen when you're young. Bojo knew he was trying to knock her down. In the end, it was because of that photo. She replied immediately, what do you know when you were young? Chin Mo tapped her wrist. You don't want to talk about your childhood. Bojo nodded. It was mainly because you would get jealous. Chin Mo chuckled. His slender and fair hand was still tapping her wrist. He seemed to respect her opinion. He pondered over it slowly. The light landed on his chin. Let's talk about how many people you have chased and how I fell in love with you at first sight. Bojo, this wasn't even as good as the previous topic. Bojo wilted. She leaned her head against Chin Mo's chest, her gaze wavering. Brother Mo, my head hurts. Do you think I'll believe you? Chin Mo smirked. Bojo didn't reply. Even with the Almighty's words, he reached out to caress her head, his voice gentle and soothing. It was easy for her to relax. If it wasn't for another sentence. Aren't you going to bring the photo? Bojo would have remained motionless. I'm not doing it anymore. It looks good. Why aren't you doing it? Chin Mo was nonchalant. When he felt the warmth from her body, he peeled another piece of candy. It's good to reminisce about the past at the right time. Bojo didn't move. You said it so generously, I almost believed you. It's in the drawer. Bojo felt that this was a battle of wits and bravery. She didn't relax at all. It was time to give her the candy. Unexpectedly, he smiled again. The same thing happened. This time, he didn't throw the candy into the bin. Instead, he ate it himself. Bojo, was it so hard to eat candy nowadays? Besides, he had clearly been feeding it to her. Chin Mo swept her a glance, his voice calm. Do you want to eat it? Bojo replied. What if acting pitiful worked? Reality proved that acting pitiful wasn't a good thing in front of the Almighty. Chin Mo chuckled, pinching her face. Bear with it. Bojo, her awkwardness was definitely because of the photo. Bojo's mind was a little empty from the heat. She didn't think about recovering her memory. After all, Chin Mo didn't seem to have any intention of telling her. He wanted her to come back on her own. And when he found out that the scheming boy he was talking about was him, that feeling was really. Chin Mo lowered his lids, pinching her face again to see how long it would take for her to come back to her senses. Bojo didn't know why he was pinching her, but the warmth in his eyes was too strong. He treated her as though she was a treasure. His eyes were half-lidded, making him look abstinent and seductive. He specialized in attacking people's hearts. The only thing she couldn't do about was seduction. Her clear eyes would naturally stare straight at him. Chin Mo paused when he saw her. His gaze deepened and he bent down, intending to kiss the corner of her lips. Unexpectedly, he couldn't control himself. His fingers slid across her softness. He wanted to melt her into a puddle in his arms. Bojo felt dizzy from the kiss. Even a fever couldn't compare to the warmth the Almighty gave her. Even so, Chin Mo could feel her body temperature rising. His forehead was pressed against hers. Because of her lack of energy, her heart seemed to be tied into a knot. Her blood seemed to have stopped flowing. He hugged her and in the end, fed her a candy. He lowered his head and kissed her hair. Tell me when you're thirsty. Bojo didn't think the Almighty was good at taking care of people in the past. But this time, it was different. Actually, even though it was just a fever, it was quite troublesome. There was no taste in her mouth. She wanted to drink water and eat something sweet and sour at the same time. But it wasn't good to eat sweets all the time. Her throat couldn't take it. It wasn't easy to make a person with a fever comfortable. However, his eyes never left her. Whenever she moved, he would know what she was going to do. The candy was replaced by fruit, and he was the one who fed her the whole time. She didn't even need to go to the washroom. Bojo's hands were weak, but she didn't need the drip anymore. He didn't listen to her. He bent down and carried her into the washroom. He even helped her untie the belt of her pajamas. The back of the Almighty's hands was very white. His fingertips seemed to be glowing. It was a sign of his temperament. When he brushed past her, Bojo always felt that it was strange for his hands to untie her pants. But from this angle, he didn't seem to mind at all. "Call me when you're done." It was probably because he was taking care of her meticulously. Under the Almighty's supervision, Bojo drank many cups of water in one go. At around 10 p.m., Bojo's body temperature had returned to normal. She closed her eyes and fell asleep in his arms. Unlike her, Chin Mo didn't sleep. He hugged her with one hand and used the other to check her temperature from time to time. A fever was most afraid of relapses in the night. Everyone knew that. Chin Mo didn't fall asleep immediately. His fingers caressed her cheeks and pushed the hair away. The gentleness in his eyes was bottomless. It seemed like it was about to spill out. But Bojo, who was already asleep, didn't see it. Otherwise, she would have felt that the look in his eyes was very familiar. Grandpa Butler stood outside the door. He had prepared the soup and wanted to come in, but when he saw this scene, he silently closed the door and looked at the silver pocket watch. He was clear that even without him, young Lord would recover very well today. Because the best medicine was meticulous care. In this aspect, no one could compare to the young master of the Chin family. Bojo slept comfortably. She couldn't help but rub her face against the warm cotton. She didn't know it wasn't a pillow but the sleeping shirt Chin Mo was wearing. The moment she moved, Chin Mo would open his eyes and look at her to check her temperature. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He pinched her face. "I've given you so many hints but you still haven't guessed the answer. Little Bojo, it isn't wrong to call you an idiot." Bojo seemed to be dreaming of something good. Her lips were still half raised. Her mouth was slightly open and there was moisture coming out. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. He turned sideways and placed the photo back in its original position. The night sky was getting darker. The netizens weren't sure what was going on. Their focus was on the competition. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance wasn't as good as the Japanese. Chapter 1352. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance's standards weren't as good as the Japanese. Many analysis posts were published, the gist of which was that the chances of Supreme Alliance losing were too high. It wasn't because Supreme Alliance wasn't good, but because the Japanese were too capable. Putting Yusishin aside, Hoshino's skills were world-class. They weren't just members of the Japanese. They were chosen by the Japanese to represent them in the international competition every year. Moreover, Supreme Alliance's strength didn't only come from their individual skills, more importantly, it came from their own fan base. Any one of them could start a conversation. It wasn't just limited to China. A long time ago, Lin Chintao had mentioned that Hoshino was his idol. His influence was evident since he was the idol of professional gamers. Supreme Alliance versus the Japanese. In China, there wasn't much of a difference. But in the international sports scene, the name Supreme Alliance hadn't appeared in the past 3 years. The foreign media had flipped through Supreme Alliance's competition history. Such a team wasn't eye-catching. Except for the most valuable esports player. But it had been 3 years since Chin Mo had been sealed. From the foreign media's point of view, Supreme Alliance hadn't been outstanding for the past 3 years. Did that mean Chin Mo's strength had weakened? After all, in China, many esports players would start a live stream after becoming a professional esports player. The huge influx of fans seemed to have made them forget their original intentions. In the end, they could still do live streams, but not professional esports. It was simple, the money earned from a professional esport wasn't as fast as a live stream. Besides, the fans would sometimes have fantasies about them, sending countless girls to their doorsteps. Hence, in the eyes of the foreign media, Supreme Alliance was already in the same state. After all, the team's looks made people feel that they should be celebrities. Moreover, it was Chin Mo. Many people said that if you were ugly, people would subconsciously identify you. Similarly, handsome people could do it too. It was just that their positions were different. The greater the discussion, the greater the pressure on Supreme Alliance. On the other hand, since they were professionals, they had to bear this pressure. The internet cafe was still lit, but it wasn't open. Yin Wuyao had a cigarette in his mouth. Just as he was about to go to bed, he heard someone knocking on the door. He pulled the iron door open and saw 3 people standing in a row outside. Shui Yao Yao, Coco, and Feng Shang. Perhaps it was because it was almost the holidays, the atmosphere outside was especially strong. The atmosphere of Christmas was everywhere, and it was snowing. The 3 of them always looked very young when they wore their combat uniforms on the outside and cotton-padded clothes on the inside. But Yin Wuyao thought for a moment. These 3 weren't that old, the oldest was only 19 years old. Come in. Yin Wuyao was still holding a box of instant noodles in his hand. Now that he saw 3 more people, he turned around and asked, "Do you want to eat?" The 3 of them nodded and followed behind Yin Wuyao, like children following their parents. As Yin Wuyao cooked instant noodles with a cigarette in his mouth, he wondered if he had become a mother ahead of time. One of the benefits of internet cafes was the abundance of snacks. The 3 of them didn't train today. Other than Coco, their faces were now recognizable. Even when they walked over, they wore masks and were now sitting in the private room. The private room was huge. The 3 of them sat, hugging a huge pile of snacks and watching Slam Dunk. Unlike the National League, they didn't play like their lives depended on it. They didn't watch the Japanese's tactics. There were so many classic images of the Japanese, they could imagine it even with their eyes closed. If there was a god in every field, the Japanese were undoubtedly the god of esports. Logic told them that they should relax and face the competition the next day. But they couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. It seemed like there were times when one would have such a feeling. When you were an ordinary person, you wanted to live a little more. When you weren't ordinary anymore, you could walk on the streets and see people discussing the holidays as they pleased. But when you could only wear a mask and walk through the dazzling array of shops, you would always be envious of others. The loneliness in your heart didn't seem to have found peace. Even the uneasiness wasn't something anyone could understand. Because they could feel their standards dropping, they couldn't help but walk here. Coco had thought that he would be alone, but the moment he turned the corner, he saw little Stutterer tying his shoelaces and Yao Yao waving at them. They didn't plan to meet each other, it was just a chance encounter. It seemed like everyone was the same, only then could they feel at ease. They knew what they were afraid of. They were afraid that they would lose the competition when their captain wasn't around. They were afraid that they would drag the entire team down because of their poor positioning. They didn't need anyone to tell them, they were clear about these problems. They were even afraid of these things, worried about them. After all, Little Spade had been in a bad state after the competition. Even now, her phone hadn't been switched on. The discussions online continued. They couldn't satisfy everyone. Even if they were sick, there would still be people who would find fault with them. Yin Wuyao had been in the industry for a long time, he knew what they were thinking when he came out with the noodles. He used his chopsticks to knock on the side of the pot. "Bring the bowls. Why does the noodles feel a little hard?" Coco was the first to eat. Feng Shang took a sip of the soup. There's something to eat, that's good enough." He accepted the explanation. Yin Wuyao was a rough uncle, he usually boiled his noodles, but when he saw the 3 of them, he turned on the fire. He arched a brow and took a bite, realizing that it wasn't delicious yet. He stopped eating. He lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, smiling faintly. I say, I'm an old man, I don't worry so much. You guys are so young, why are you thinking so much? Even if you lose, you will still have a chance in the future. Coco paused, not saying a word. Yin Weiyao patted his shoulder. Don't give yourself too much pressure, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Don't worry about making mistakes, these things are normal in the competition. It wasn't clear if Yin Weiyao's words were effective or if it was because of the hunger. It was easier to resist. After finishing the noodles, the three of them found their own beds and sofas, lying down and falling asleep. Yin Weiyao glanced at it and brought 2 blankets over without batting an eyelid. One covered Coco and Feng Shang, while the other covered Shui Yao Yao. Then he turned his head, turning off the lights in the room. In the darkness, he didn't go to sleep. Instead, he turned his head and lit another cigarette. Then he took out his phone, sending Feng Yi a message. They're all asleep, they've thought it through now, but I don't know what will happen tomorrow. When Feng Yi saw the message, he raised his hand and loosened the collar of his shirt. He lifted his head and looked at the city lights outside the window. That's right, what should I do tomorrow? He wasn't the only one thinking about this. With both hands in his pockets, Lin Feng, who was wearing a long black down jacket, was also thinking about this question after walking 3 streets. He was probably so focused that he didn't even notice the glass door in front of him. With a loud bang, he crashed into it. Lin Feng said in pain, "Aw." The most awkward thing wasn't being seen by strangers. It was being seen by the people he was most familiar with. It was accompanied by light laughter from the girls. What else could Lin Feng do? He had an expression that said, "I know you're laughing at me." Unfortunately, he was wearing a mask, the expression couldn't be conveyed. But when he glanced sideways, he met a pair of eyes. That person didn't ask if it was painful, raising his hand, brushing aside the hair in front of his forehead, his fingertips rubbing the reddened area. He didn't need to think to know that the other party must have seen the scene just now. What are you thinking about without looking at the road? Yunhu's voice was calm. Lin Feng coughed and avoided the topic. He also avoided his hand. Why are you here? Yunhu didn't intend to hide his tracks. I followed you all the way. When Lin Feng heard this, he felt a little uncomfortable. She heard him say, I've seen enough stupid things. Lin Feng opened his mouth, wanting to start a war. Let's find a place to talk. Yunhu looked serious. I'm under a lot of pressure. When Lin Feng heard this, his attitude changed instantly, placing his hand on Yunhu's shoulder. Come, tell me what's bothering you. Ever since he was young, he had always been troubled by a lot of things. Yunhu was someone else's child. Pressure. What a joke. He had never experienced it before. Moreover, he had never experienced any major setbacks, other than the ones they had experienced together. It was all because he was obvious. On the other hand, Yunhu really couldn't see anything. When Lin Feng was young, he wanted to be a caring brother, but he never had the chance because Yunhu was outstanding. There wasn't any pressure at all. Even during the few days before and after the college entrance examination, he still ran on time. It was as though nothing could affect him. Now, it was finally Yunhu's turn to need his guidance. It was a dream come true. Lin Feng walked to the side with Yunhu, pleased with himself. Yunhu glanced sideways at the hand on his shoulder. He smiled. This guy didn't seem to realize that there was a difference between a straight person. The two of them were at the largest commercial square in Jiang City. This square was originally very fashionable. In addition to the geographical location, there were many people even at night. There were balloon sellers, guitars and some young rollerblading kids. Perhaps it was because Yunhu's height was too eye-catching. Even though both of them were wearing masks, their tall and slender figures attracted many girls. Lin Feng didn't realize that the gazes were directed at them. He brought Yunhu to sit on the long bench in the square, looking at the pile of balloons not far away. What kind of pressure is it? Are you afraid you won't perform well tomorrow? Yunhu replied faintly, his long legs crossed. He didn't look like he was under pressure, as though he was just finding an excuse to stay with this person. The atmosphere was especially festive. They could vaguely hear the music from the coffee shop. It was Yi Sin Chen's voice, singing, "Christmas Knot." I completely understand what you're thinking. Lin Feng seemed to be very experienced, sighing deeply, starting to imitate Yunhu's posture. He sat like that, relaxed, but his hands were a little cold. But this didn't affect his interest in being a caring brother. As long as you wait for me. Yunhu spoke before he could. I'll go buy a cup of coffee. Lin Feng agreed with this point. Being a caring brother meant drinking coffee, that would make it seem more formal. There was a coffee shop nearby. It sold quickly. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that after Yunhu brought 2 cups of hot coffee out, Lin Feng sat on the long bench, watching the heat in his hands. When he reached out to take it, he heard a sentence from the side. Look at how good my boyfriend is. He's a guy, he knows it's cold, he's buying a cup of coffee, but you don't know how to buy it for me. Lin Feng, boyfriend, a guy, buying coffee for him, one could imagine what his expression was like. Yunhu was very natural. Help me. Oh. Lin Feng thought to himself, the girl who just walked over was definitely a fujoshi. A fujoshi would look at anyone, but this had nothing to do with him. Unexpectedly, before he could take the coffee, another voice floated over. How oppressive. It's fine if you wear couple outfits out, but you're actually sitting outside drinking coffee. Wearing couple outfits. Lin Feng tilted his head, glancing at the long black down jacket on Yunhu. Girl, down jackets for boys are all the same. Take a closer look, there is a difference. How can this be a couple outfit? Awkward. Even the naive Lin Feng felt awkward, it showed how many people were watching. He couldn't drink this coffee no matter what. After all, he had to remove his mask to drink coffee. If he and Yunhu removed their masks. By then, who knew what kind of topic it would bring? Hence, Lin Feng didn't think much, he stood up with the steaming hot coffee between them. Let's go, we'll talk when we get back. That was his original plan, but who knew that he might have stood up too abruptly, the cup of coffee in his hand slanted to the side, scalding him and throwing it out. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who didn't expect this. Even Yunhu hadn't expected it. There were coffee stains on his pants. Because he was usually too neat, he seemed slightly disheveled. From that angle, it seemed as though Lin Feng was worried about what others would think. He wanted to reject Yunhu's coffee but didn't know how to. A sense of alienation suddenly burst forth. Chapter 1353. Lin Feng sensed it too. He opened his mouth, wanting to explain. That, I'm not, Yunhu interrupted him as though he didn't care. I know. Lin Feng watched the back view in front of him. Do you want to wipe your pants first? I'll wash it when I get home. Yunhu held onto the coffee cup, his eyes half-lidded, seemingly nonchalant. Lin Feng felt that his brain wasn't working properly. He could indeed wash it when he got home. I'll call a cab. Lin Feng wanted to make it up to him but he didn't expect that there wouldn't be any cabs nearby, probably due to the festival. The taxi queues in front of the commercial plaza were also in short supply. Yunhu stood there and could clearly see the steam rising from the coffee cup. He tilted his head to look at the person beside him who was still tapping on his phone. The snowflakes fell on his fingers, melting bit by bit. It was cold just looking at him. Yunhu paused, taking a step forward, passing the coffee cup in his hand over. "It'll be quick, I'm..." Lin Feng didn't understand. What did he mean? But this time, he held it firmly, not spilling it out. Yunhu took out his phone. "I'll call a cab, hold the cup, it can warm your hands." It was too polite to thank him. Lin Feng could only take the cup, using the moment he removed his mask to secretly take a sip. Unexpectedly, there was another voice coming from the other side. "Two people drinking from the same cup, it's an indirect kiss." Little Shou just doesn't seem to agree, but he actually likes it. How awkward the cute zero is. Lin Feng almost spat out his coffee. Cute. Zero. Him. F*ck, girl, take a closer look at my face. Even if I'm gay, I should be a 1. 1. Okay. Lin Feng told himself to calm down. Removing his mask would definitely expose his identity. Yunhu swept him a glance. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Sometimes, Lin Feng envied people with poor hearing. Yunhu kept his phone, his long fingers moving. "There's no car, let's go another round." "Sure, let's go." Lin Feng didn't know that there wasn't a car up there, but Yunhu didn't call for them, hoping that they could stay like this for a while longer. After all, it was a festival. It was a festival that only couples would celebrate together. Lin Feng didn't think much of it. After all, it would be better if he didn't sit on the bench. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to sleep if he went home now. This time, compared to before, it was much more ordinary. There was music floating in the square, and many people were taking pictures with peach hearts that were emitting light. During such festivals, the square would always have many shaped lights. Just looking at it made people feel like they were full of young girls. Lin Feng didn't really understand what a girl's heart was. However, seeing so many girls taking photos, for a straight man like him, it was also a beautiful scenery. If it wasn't for Yunhu's sudden question, "Do you care a lot about people calling you zero?" "Nonsense, I'm just..." Lin Feng paused for a moment. So this guy had heard him. Yunhu stuffed his hands into his pockets. "It's not your problem. Anyone who is with me will be the one down there." Lin Feng chuckled. "Brother, your ability to boast has improved a lot." Yunhu leaned forward. "Isn't it?" Lin Feng looked at the pair of eyes that were suddenly so close to him. For some reason, his heart tightened. He tilted his head. "You can talk if you want, but you're so close. You're scaring me. Even this can scare you." Yunhu straightened and spoke slowly. "When did you become so timid? Or are you worried about other people's words? You should indeed maintain a distance from me in the future. Let's go, the car is here." When Lin Feng heard that, he felt that he couldn't explain himself. Very quickly, Yunhu raised his arm and placed it on his shoulder. He hugged his neck like a good brother. "I'm joking. Let's go, the car is really here." Just like that, Lin Feng allowed Yunhu to mess around. He didn't have the mood to think about how to win against the Japanese tomorrow. His mind was filled with thoughts. Was there really something wrong with his way of doing things? Did he make Yunhu think that he would mind his sexual orientation? Hence, when Lin Feng reached home, he kept trying to make himself look warmer. Yunhu saw it in his eyes. To deal with this guy, he had to be harsh with his words. He threw the pants into the washing machine. When he turned, he could see his face. Yunhu originally thought that after today's incident, he would definitely stay and sleep with him to show that he was still close to him. Who knew that it would be different from before? When he saw him walk out, he placed the cup in his hand down. "It's getting late. Sleep early. You don't have to be so stressed." You played so well, I should be the one feeling stressed. Alright, I'm going to sleep. Lin Feng stretched as he spoke. See you tomorrow. You. Yunhu almost blurted out. Were you sleeping here? When he saw Lin Feng looking at him in confusion, he changed his tone. Remember to pick up everything. Don't forget the wrist guard. I know. Lin Feng waved his hand as he walked out. When the door closed, Yunhu could still hear his mother's voice. Yunhu could vaguely hear his mother's voice. Isn't little Feng sleeping here today? No, it's not convenient. Tomorrow, the voice at the back couldn't be heard clearly. It was probably because he had reached the entrance. Yunhu looked at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. He wore the same down jacket. Even passers-by noticed it. In his eyes, it was just an imagination. This guy's nerves were getting thicker and thicker. But there were still changes. They were very subtle. So subtle that he didn't want to think about it. It wasn't convenient for him to stay the night. What exactly was he thinking? Yunhu leaned his head against the window. Outside, the lights were bright and dazzling. It seemed that with that person around, the pressure would be greatly reduced. The Japanese were indeed too strong. They were so strong that he was worried that that person would return to his state after the competition. Even if it wasn't his fault, he would habitually look for the reason on himself. That thick-skinned person wasn't slow at all in certain aspects. Time trickled by slowly. The sky started to brighten from the east. In the largest building in Jiang City, the staff had already started to enter the arena. Their busy schedule showed how much importance the country and abroad placed on the finals. An hour later, the foreign media translator arrived. His aura was strong and attracted many people's attention. The Chinese side had been guessing what could have attracted so many foreign media from so many places. They wanted to interview them. The media was good with their words. Of course, they wouldn't express that they didn't care about Supreme Alliance. They just smiled. Everyone knows the Japanese's ability. Their competition will definitely be exciting. I believe the others are here for the same reason. It sounded tactful, but upon closer inspection, it couldn't be more direct. They hadn't mentioned Supreme Alliance throughout. They would only speak when asked. Supreme Alliance, I haven't seen their competition, but since they are representing China, they should be great. It was a perfunctory response from adults. It was obvious from their expressions that they hadn't even heard of Supreme Alliance. Of course, some of the media had done some research before, but that was all. There weren't many who were interested in Supreme Alliance. When they were asked, "Which team do you think will win?" they laughed. I think the answer is obvious. Anyone who can compete with Hoshino and Yusishin will learn a lot from this competition. Perhaps Supreme Alliance is strong, but these two international players are hard to surpass. With them, the Japanese will definitely win. The words weren't pleasant to hear. But it was undeniable that they were objective. Hoshino and Yusishin, these two names were sought after by many esports fans regardless of their nationality. They were idols for many people. Hence, it would be difficult for Supreme Alliance to win. After all, the competition between Xiangnan and the Japanese was still fresh in their minds. That year, Yusishin hadn't even participated in the Asian Cup. Just Hoshino alone was enough to defeat the Xiangnan team. During the National League, Supreme Alliance and Xiangnan had been evenly matched. It had been difficult for them to even win. With such a comparison, the difference was obvious. Moreover, Supreme Alliance was lacking Qin Mo. The netizens were also complaining. It seemed like some people were indeed like that. Whenever there was a domestic competition with an overseas team, they would always feel that the overseas team was better. There were also some who didn't know anything and started scolding. For example, "Don't come to our competition if you are so capable." Some even said, "If Supreme Alliance doesn't win, it will be a disgrace to the Chinese." It was easy to say, but these people didn't seem to consider that no one had the responsibility to win. Fortunately, all the players had disconnected from the internet. When she picked up her phone, it wasn't because she didn't want to look but because she knew it would only worsen her mood. Indeed, there were many supporters. There were many heartwarming words too. But with the competition ahead, there was a formless pressure. Hence, even though she had been burning for an entire night, there was still a string called time hanging in her heart. She opened her eyes before it was 8 p.m. Once she realized where she was, she glanced up and saw the handsome face inches away from her. It was probably because he had to take care of her last night that he didn't even take off his jacket. His black trench coat was half open, and the fur around the collar was stuck to the pillow. Her face was right on his chest, and she could see the sunlight shining on the bridge of his nose. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojo wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. Chapter 1354. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojo wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. He frowned slightly. The Almighty had always been in a bad mood when he woke up, but he didn't seem to be in a bad mood today. Instead, he grabbed her wrist with one hand and pulled her closer to him, pressing his forehead against hers. His long eyelashes were right in front of him, measuring her body temperature in the most primitive way. Satisfied, he relaxed his brows, his voice still carrying the laziness of a person who had just woken up. "You're recovering well." When he said this, his breath landed on her face, even the tip of their noses touching. His heart inexplicably skipped a beat. She wanted to kiss him, but he didn't let her. He arched a brow, avoiding her. Trying to do something naughty again. "A good morning kiss." Bojo replied innocently. Chin Mo smiled. "I don't need it." Bojo. Was dating the Almighty so unromantic? Indeed, it wasn't romantic at all. The moment she opened her eyes, he brought her a cup of medicine. Bojo didn't like medicine, so she poured half of it. The awkward thing was that the Almighty, who had just finished washing up, caught her in the act. "Seems like you have a problem with the medicine I brewed for you," Chin Mo said nonchalantly. "There's a competition later and after drinking the medicine, you'll feel sleepy." Bojo replied righteously. "I'll feel sleepy when I have a fever," Chin Mo replied, tapping the bottom of her cup with his finger. The Almighty had this aura. If you didn't listen to him, it would seem like you were being unreasonable. Bojo tilted her head up and finished the rest of the cup. The root wasn't bitter, but she couldn't stand the taste. She wanted to rinse her mouth. The moment she placed the cup down, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her lips. It wasn't an expected kiss. Bojo's hand stilled as he smiled. "Not bad, you're a good girl." That was. Little Bojo lifted her thin lips after being praised. She couldn't suppress her happiness. However, for some reason, there was an indescribable sense of familiarity. Even as she brushed her teeth, she couldn't help but feel confused. Because they were going to the competition, their clothes were very simple. The black and white uniform wasn't complicated, but when Bojo wore it, there was an indescribable tension. Today, she was not wearing a dress. Because everything that needed to be proven had already been proven. He looked like a handsome young man who had walked out of a manga. The black diamond earring on his left ear was sparkling. When she walked out, she saw that person standing in front of the dressing mirror, tilting his head to tidy up his sleeves. His slender and fair fingers were beautiful. It was as if just this action alone could remind her of the way he played games. Time and time again, he amazed everyone and created impossible records again and again. The Almighty's skin was really good. The white porcelain always gave people a cold feeling that was difficult to approach. Abstinence's aura had never weakened since he put on the battle uniform. Behind him, the word Supreme Alliance floated. It was just like the first time they met, when he stood at the highest point. That was right. Bo Jiao told herself. Chapter 1355. At 10 in the morning, before the ticketing started, there was already a huge crowd at the venue. The atmosphere at the venue could be described as a boiling cauldron of voices. There weren't just domestic fans, there were also some who flew over from other places just to watch the Asian Cup. The media held their topics and cameras, interviewing everywhere. The scene was so lively that even security personnel were deployed. The subway entrance at that station had been blocked to the point where not even a drop of water could trickle through. Everyone had an indescribable excitement on their faces. The organizers had even invited famous cosplayers and CVs in the industry. Everyone had seen cosplayers cosplaying Almighties before. But it was the first time the fans had seen Almighties dubbing in the game. The benefits of the Asian Cup finals were simply too good to be true. Regardless of whether it was a girl or a boy, they would stick the logo of the team they supported on their faces. The temperature in Jiang City wasn't low, but it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the people. Shui Yaoyao watched the scene on the television, reaching out to stuff the milk that Coco had given her into her backpack. Yin Wuyao had prepared the milk. In his eyes, the three of them were all children. He had spoken to Feng Yi on the phone yesterday. At 10:30, the commercial car of Supreme Alliance arrived on time. Feng Yi was sitting in the front passenger seat. The first thing he asked was, "Have you eaten?" "Why yes, Uncle's girlfriend made it." Feng Shang held the milk bag in his mouth, looking refreshed. Feng Yi turned back, arching a brow at Yin Wuyao. Yin Wuyao replied calmly, "Fan." A fan who chased him to the internet cafe. Coco held the milk bag in his mouth. "She's quite cute and good at cooking, but I feel like she only likes Uncle. I'm so handsome but she hasn't seen me before." Feng Yi smiled. "Did you give her a ticket?" Since he had given the team a meal, he had to at least give her a ticket. Yin Wuyao replied, "She doesn't understand the game." A fan who doesn't understand the game. Feng Yi wasn't trying to dig deeper, he was just trying to lighten the mood before the competition. Shui Yaoyao spoke up. "She said she's a fan of Uncle's looks." "Yes. That's why I can't accept it." Coco pointed to himself. "Look at my face and then at Uncle, I should be the one chosen." Feng Shang stammered, That's your self-perception. There's a problem." Feng Yi relaxed a little as he listened to the bickering in the car. At least everyone was in a good state. That was more important than anything else. At 12:30 p.m., the tickets were officially checked in. The length of the queue was astonishing. Tickets could be checked on both floors, but even so, the staff were so busy that they didn't even have time to drink water. After entering, they took their seats according to their seat numbers. In order to avoid chaos, the ticketing area had already been divided according to the ticket numbers. 1 million people were present at the same time. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. The crew was not in position yet. However, this did not affect the live broadcast of some media on the platform. Anything that happened at the scene could become a hot topic on a certain blog. The esports channel of a certain live streaming app even did a big follow-up report. The host was a streamer with a huge following. The competition is about to start. The Asian Cup is held every year, but this year's competition is especially popular. Almighty C, have you guessed the reason? Firstly, this year's Asian Cup is being held in our country. Many esports fans in our country are looking forward to it. After all, in the past, they had to travel to other countries to watch competitions, and even the itinerary was inconvenient. Now that the Asian Cup is being held at home, the feeling and attention will definitely be different. Many of my friends from my hometown have asked me to help them find 2 tickets. Those who have played hero would more or less want to see the almighties that they have admired over the years. This is inseparable from their emotions. Moreover, the team representing China this year isn't Xiangnan, but Supreme Alliance. The strength of this team will leave a deeper impression. As an old man who has retired from esports, if it wasn't for my work arrangements, I would really like to go and take a look. Ah! The host seemed to have noticed something, his finger pointing at the screen. Speaking of Xiangnan, they seem to be there as well. That's normal since the competition is worth watching. The host asked, from what Almighty C said, you seem to have a good opinion of Supreme Alliance. I'm not sure if you saw the interview this morning, but someone said that it would be extremely difficult for Supreme Alliance to win this competition. Indeed, it will be difficult. Hence, Supreme Alliance will need to go all out. If not, they might be suppressed by the Japanese. Oh. Why do you say that? Is it because Chin Mo isn't around? The host was interested to hear the analysis from the audience. You'll understand when you watch the competition. Facing the Japanese is a very stressful task. The strength of the Japanese lies in the fact that every one of their players is outstanding. Even their trainees are comparable to some of our professional players. I'm not saying this to belittle our country or anything. Everyone knows the current situation. In terms of esports, they seem to have a natural advantage. With Yu Cixin and Hoshino blocking their path, no team can think calmly against them. Any strategy will be useless against the Japanese. Everyone who plays games knows how strong Hoshino's prediction skills are. Even though he isn't the captain of the Japanese, he is hailed as the god of prediction. Yu Cixin doesn't need to be mentioned, he is able to accurately predict a person's movements and habits after watching them play once. Only in an esports competition will you be able to see how terrifying he is. The host was taken aback. Almighty C, are you saying that even if Chin Mo is here, the chances of Supreme Alliance losing are high? No, that's not what I meant. It depends on how Supreme Alliance adjusts their mental state. They are facing the gods in the eyes of many professional esports players. More or less, some people entered the industry because of their competition videos. Both Hoshino and Yu Cixin would have a mental breakdown if they met the two of them. Next, let's talk about Chin Mo. It's still uncertain if he's participating since we didn't see him in the previous match. From the news online, he should have lost his memory. Even if he's here, he won't be as good as he used to be. That's the most worrying thing. Almighty C's analysis seems to be the case. The host paused before shouting in delight, they are here. Supreme Alliance's car is here. Everyone turned towards the screen when they heard her voice. An expensive commercial car drove in. Everyone knew Supreme Alliance wasn't lacking in money, hence, the players were equipped with the best equipment in the industry, including the team car. When they saw the car driving in, the media surrounded it. Feng Yi was the first to come down. He was still dressed in a suit, a smile on his face. He raised his hands and stopped the media. One by one, the members of the team jumped out of the car and were escorted into the elevator by the security personnel. Even though they were separated by a screen, it was as if they could feel the tense and fiery atmosphere. The host shook his head in pity. As everyone can see, this is indeed Supreme Alliance's car. Almighty Qin isn't in the team. I'm afraid it's just as Almighty C said, Supreme Alliance will likely be suppressed by the Japanese in this match. Qin Mo didn't appear, which made the fans' hearts rise again. In reality, the most listless ones were the team members. Lin Feng was usually a chatterbox, but today, he didn't say a word. He had a down jacket over his uniform and his hat was buttoned up. Honestly, he wasn't pretending to be deep, but there were too many people. It was quieter and the atmosphere wasn't right. But at this stage, Feng Yi didn't know what to say. Young Master Coco knew everyone had their own thoughts. Hence, even though he was depressed, he didn't show it. However, it was still different from before. From the entrance to the lounge, no one spoke a word during the long journey. Feng Yi knew that if he tried to stir up the atmosphere, they would definitely cooperate. But their hearts were heavy. This was similar to the year when they lost the competition and lost the chance to advance. No one wanted to speak. They were filled with sadness, disappointment, indignation, self-blame, and a series of other emotions. Perhaps it was too quiet, so Lin Feng asked, "Which lounge are we in?" "The one in front," Feng Yi replied. "Oh." Lin Feng replied. He was the first to reach it, removing his jacket as he pushed the door open. However, when Lin Feng pushed open the door, he was stunned. Even his movements froze. He wasn't hallucinating, right? Captain. Lin Feng started to suspect that he was hallucinating. But Chongqing stood there with his sleeves rolled up. He was wearing a battle uniform, but he gave off an aura of abstinence. The only one who could wear a large uniform was the captain. "Why are you standing at the entrance?" As Coco spoke, he tried to push him away. Unexpectedly, after he pushed him away, he successfully became dumbfounded. But Coco wasn't the type to let his imagination run wild. He shouted for Captain while pouncing towards Qin Mo. Bojio reached out to push him away, a smile on her face. "Coco, even if you are a guy, please maintain a suitable distance from my boyfriend. Don't pounce on him so easily." Of course, she was the only one who could pounce on the Almighty. After Coco was pushed away, he wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled happily, showing his 2 canine teeth. "I knew Little Spade was the best. You are handsome and reliable. Bringing Captain back is a small matter, how could it be difficult for you? It's good that you understand. You don't have to say it out loud even though I like it." This was the reply of someone who had never known humility. Shui Yao Yao and Yin Wuyao, who were still standing at the entrance, couldn't help but laugh. Rao Rong's eyes lit up. He turned towards Qin Mo. Even if he had lost his memory, he should be the one to end the match. Lin Feng paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. His first reaction was to hug Little Spade's neck and caress her head. Of course. This idea, he was just thinking about it. Because just as he raised his hand, preparing to place it on Little Spade's shoulder, the captain's emotionless gaze landed on his face, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Lin Feng's scalp went numb. He immediately retracted his hand. "Just pretend that nothing had happened. It's good that you're here." Feng Yi walked in. At this moment, the smile on his face was real. He had already prepared himself for Little Spade's absence. Unexpectedly, Little Spade wasn't the only one who came. Even young Master Qin was back. At this moment, the rock in Feng Yi's heart finally fell. After all these years, all he owed was a match like this. Because there were other people in the team, he had to consider them every time. They were supposed to be famous in international competitions, but because of the team itself, they couldn't compete at a bigger venue. If they were really implicated, in reality, it was Supreme Alliance that implicated Qin Mo. They weren't like Xiangnan, they didn't have a lot of reserve strength to use. In fact, they didn't even have the right conditions. If he had gone to Xiangnan, his godlike operation would have been known to the world. Supreme Alliance was too new and they couldn't find good players. As a result, there weren't many people who could match up with Qin Mo. He was the MVP in every match, be it against the wind or with the wind. But in the end, Supreme Alliance didn't even have the qualifications to leave the fortress. This was the portrayal of Supreme Alliance in the past. As for those with the highest points, because their teams didn't advance, they all disappeared. Even so, when all the big teams came to poach him, he didn't leave. From an assassin who came and went without a trace, he became a team control who stood under the tower. These were all sacrifices he made for Supreme Alliance. Fortunately, it was different this year. Once again, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's existence. She didn't just find young Master Qin, but also the game, perhaps others couldn't tell. He knew the sacrifices Qin Mo made and understood the best. After Little Spade appeared, he was really happy when he played the game again. Because he didn't have to worry about anything, he could use the character he was best at to compete. It was just like the first time he met him. Feng Yi believed that even without his memories, he could still amaze the audience. Lin Feng didn't think too much, he just wanted to ask one thing. Little Spade, are you okay? He left in that state yesterday and couldn't be contacted. Of course he was worried. He hadn't expected to be fed dog food. My body. I'm fine. I had a fever last night and Brother Mo took care of me the whole night, using his forehead to test my temperature. I don't think you can enjoy such gentleness. Chapter 1356. F***ck. Why did he have to ask such a question? Lin Fang's lips twitched. He didn't feel like speaking anymore. It had been because of his sadness previously, but now, it was because of his pain. In the future, she would capture all the people who flaunted their affection in the game and confiscate their assets. Bo Jiu didn't think so. When she had been in the military, she hadn't even had anyone to flaunt their affection for. Now that she finally had someone, she had to talk to her best friend, Lin Feng. Lin Feng asked, "Wait a minute, what did you say I was?" "Best friend." "What?" Bo Jiu arched a brow. Lin Feng's face was fierce. "I'm a man and you want me to be your best friend. Yao Yao is your best friend. Go talk to Yao Yao." "It's not the same." Bo Jiu replied slowly, "It's fun to talk to you. Doesn't your Zero like it?" Another critical hit after the previous night. Zero. Him. F***ck. Is there a Zero like me? Little Spade, tell me, are you looking for a fight? That had been the Supreme Alliance's state in the past. But Lin Feng realized that a certain someone's skin was getting thicker by the day. How dare she call him a Zero, that was intolerable. "Come, let's fight." Bo Jiu smiled, reaching out to pull him over. Her face was devilishly handsome. "Anyway, I have the Almighty to help me. You can find someone to help you if you can." Lin Feng choked, grabbing his hair. "After all this, you still want to flaunt your affection. Why should I fall for your tricks?" "Why?" He didn't expect his captain to care about Little Spade anymore. From the look in his eyes, it was clear that he approved of it. Moreover, his captain didn't remember them. Seriously, Lin Feng sat down, asking his teammates, "Can you guys tolerate it?" "Little Flower Lin." Coco caressed his chin, his gaze deep. "I feel that being abused has something to do with one's face. Why don't you do it? I'll help you adjust and perhaps you might be able to escape the fate of being abused." Lin Feng didn't reply. Basically, he had lost all hope in life, giving him a whatever expression. Coco waved the pen in his hand, a mischievous glint in his eyes. As he drew, he said, "My fan gave me this, the effect is really good." Really? It's true. F***ck, Coco, what did you draw for me? 1. Didn't you emphasize that you are one? Lin Feng wanted to wipe it off, but he realized that it really couldn't be wiped off. Yunhu reached out to stop him. It looks good. The person in the mirror had a 1 drawn on the side of his face, at the corner of his eyes, making him look much younger. The atmosphere in the lounge was so relaxed that no matter what they were going to face next, they had nothing to fear. Rao Rong stood at the side, watching the scene with a slight smile. Suddenly, Lin Chintao's voice rang out. It's great that Supreme Alliance has such an atmosphere. Rao Rong tilted his head, looking at the person who was muttering to himself. He reached out and placed his hand on his naturally curled hair. You are now a member of Supreme Alliance. Hearing this, Lin Chintao paused for a moment before smiling brightly. Yeah, me too. The members of the pro teams knew that other than Xiangnan, the atmosphere before the match wouldn't be like this. In the past, the investors would shove people into the team in order to raise their popularity. They could have won the competition, but because of this, they would be exhausted. Supreme Alliance was different. It felt as though their dreams weren't just dreams anymore. He wanted to prove himself in the profession he loved. At the very least, he wanted his parents to know. He wasn't any worse than those who worked. His profession could also be respected by others. Perhaps, he could understand why Almighty Yin had joined this team after his retirement. Because here, he had found the drive he had when he had first entered the industry. He wanted to wear the national flag with his teammates and stand on the champion seat. That day had finally come. There wasn't a single person present who didn't think so. In the past year, they had been chased after, liked, spread rumors, tarnished beyond recognition, becoming a memory etched in many people's minds. Their abilities would be revealed in today's competition. Perhaps because the atmosphere was too harmonious, Qin Mo didn't seem to have any intentions of mentioning it. Hence, apart from Bojo, no one in the team knew that Qin Mo had recovered his memory, much less the shoutcasters. 1:45 p.m. There were 15 minutes left before the competition officially started. At the scene, every staff member in charge of broadcasting was checking the equipment in their hands in order to avoid any problems during the live broadcast. The 3 hosts, 2 men and 1 woman, stood on the stage, facing the script. Time trickled by. Therefore, the esports fans who came to watch the competition were already seated. The audience outside had been cleared. 10 minutes ago, the ticketing could no longer be checked. The atmosphere was unimaginable. 1:55 p.m. The various online gaming channels were flooded with red. After the stage control and director checked their watches, they gestured to the backstage. Voices rang out from the resting rooms of both teams. Although the language was different, the meaning was similar. He reminded all the teams that there were less than 5 minutes left before the start of the match, and asked all the teams to get into position. When the voice rang out, Lin Feng was still pointing at the number 1 on his face, asking Yunhu if he should attack. After hearing this broadcast, everyone's expression changed in an instant. It was replaced with unprecedented seriousness. That's right, seriousness. Even Feng Shang seemed to have grown up, his features clear and distinct. Yin Weiyao paused in the act of lighting his cigarette. Rao Rong put on the wrist guard on his right hand. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket, the corners of her lips curved upwards, clearly showing off. Just like her most commonly used hero, the devilish handsomeness that swept away everything. Qin Mo reached out to close the cabinet, turning around. His voice was calm, but it seemed to be able to shake the entire venue. Are you ready? Lin Fang's eyes were filled with shock. It was too familiar. This was the question their captain would ask them every time they went on stage. But that wasn't the end. He held onto his uniform with one hand, the other reaching out, his palm clenched into a fist. His gaze was deep, as though it could reflect everything that had happened over the years. The first time he had represented Supreme Alliance in battle. He had come this far from being a newbie. The year he had lost, he had leaned against the wall, not saying a word. Did he remember all of that? Lin Fang's eyes reddened, stretching his hand out. It was impossible for the others not to understand something that even he understood. Everyone clenched their fists together. Supreme Alliance. Chapter 1357. Swoosh. The screen opened. The director signaled for the last time. The three presenters glanced towards the camera. 1:58 p.m. The final countdown to the online video. Words streaked across the screen, words written by countless fans for Supreme Alliance. Some said that this group of people had all the craziness of their youth. The black coffee they had shared with their brothers. The instant noodles they had eaten together. The unforgettable first love. Even more so, the best appearance of our youth. 2018 Esports Asian Cup. There was a loud bang. Flames surged. The appearance of the presenter signified the start of the competition. Hello everyone, we meet again. I believe everyone is anxious, we are just like you, not knowing what kind of exciting competition we will be watching. Let me reiterate, this is the finals of the 2018 Esports Asian Cup. Don't change the channel, the players you want to see will be appearing soon. Come, let's start the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 1, 0. Let's welcome the first team, the Japanese. Swoosh. All the lights were focused on a single point. At the large entrance on the left, those people seemed to have walked out from the halo. It wasn't baseless to say that the Japanese were strong. Just like their aura, it was as if they were formed by nature. Yusishin still had long, silky black hair, but it didn't seem feminine. Instead, after he wore the tailored uniform, there was a sharpness that couldn't be ignored, just like the smile hanging on his lips. His dark aura was thick, it wasn't something to be trifled with. Hoshino stood beside him. It was obvious he was different today, his black hair tied up with a hairband, his brows like the first snow of winter, revealing his original aura. The doll-faced man stood behind, the entire lineup drawn out. Even though it wasn't their home game. The cheers for Hoshino and Yusishin didn't diminish. Some even stood up in agitation. It was purely out of love. On the screens, the information of every member of the Japanese team was displayed. It was enough to make the blood boil. It was because of this that people wanted to see Supreme Alliance come out. The fans clutched the support sticks in their hands so tightly they couldn't even imagine it. In that group of people, there was an auntie who didn't seem to understand what esports was. She was dressed very beautifully today, just like when she had appeared in court for her daughter. However, at that time, the light in her eyes was almost extinguished. The injustices. Who could really empathize with her? When she was in so much pain that she even wanted to end her own life, some people were still asking her to talk about her morals. She got through the darkness that she thought she would never get out of. Rather than saying that he had gained power. Or rather, when she saw the child, she felt that there was still light. Now she was sitting here, watching that group of people compete. His heart was warm, and so were his eyes. There were some things that she did not understand. But she understood those emotions. The young lady beside her held onto her hand and pointed. Auntie, a big spade will be coming out from that place in a while. I wonder what she will be wearing today and if she will be wearing a dress. She wore a dress yesterday, commanding the entire battle. Her godly predictions emptied my blood. If she wears a dress today, the guys sitting next to us will definitely go crazy. Me too, I brought a Polaroid so I could take a photo of her for my friends. Regardless of what she wears, I like it. As the young lady spoke, she would laugh with her friends. Previously, they had been worried that she wouldn't understand, which was why they had sat on either side of her. Even when they had entered the stadium, they had helped her, even pointing at their own fan attire. We are all Spade fans, we are a family. Who was the one that said that the more darkness one experienced, the more warmth one would understand? They had never met before, but because of their mutual love for the same person, they would protect her wherever they went. Auntie, sit here. The young ladies would even tidy up the rubbish and place it in a bag. Those small actions were enough to see through a person's heart. It seemed like all the ladies that liked that child were like that. With that thought, she smiled. That should be the case, after all, they were that child's fans. All right, almighties from the Japanese, we are done with the introductions. Now, let's welcome our second team, Supreme Alliance. The moment the two words, Supreme Alliance, came out, countless people felt as if their hearts were being squeezed, and all their gazes were looking in the same direction. At the place where the lights were concentrated, figures could be vaguely seen walking out. All of them stood with their backs to the light, their shadows long and slender. It was probably because of the strong lighting, which made it difficult to see their faces clearly. When they slowly approached and formed a line, some people suddenly froze in place. Their eyes widened, tearing up. Some of them even reached out to cover their mouths in agitation. It was all because of the tall and straight figure at the front. The wind blew against his uniform, causing it to flap loudly. He lifted his brows slightly, and all the light seemed to rush into his eyes, dazzling to the extreme. Boss! Almighty Chin! I knew you would come back. We are all waiting for you. It wasn't known who shouted first, but with a loud swoosh, a few boys unfurled the banner in their hands, their eyes red and filled with passion. In reality, they really didn't have any hope. Even though they were indignant, he hadn't even appeared in the previous match. So many people were scolding him. They were scolding him for not being able to handle the pressure as an almighty. But they forgot that they were the ones who didn't allow him to participate. After yesterday, many of them weren't feeling good. Especially the fans of the official team, they had been waiting under his official Weibo, watching his past posts and videos that had dominated the headlines countless times. They reposted silently, hoping that he would come back. After all, Supreme Alliance without Chin Mo. How could it be the real Supreme Alliance? Don't forget who had created it. It could be said that no one had the right to decide Supreme Alliance's direction. Only he had. Because of him, Supreme Alliance had been remembered by countless people that year. And because of him, Supreme Alliance hadn't been eliminated until this day. Many teams had disbanded because their members were old and had lost their value. But Supreme Alliance didn't. It was because of that person who balanced these things. Perhaps only the fans who had followed him all the way would understand. Asking a natural-born assassin to retract his edge and play a gentle team control. How much sacrifice was required? He wasn't like what the outside world said, unable to withstand the pressure. Chapter 1358. Chin Mo's appearance was an unexpected surprise. The number of views on the live stream reached its peak in a second. It wasn't just the fans who hadn't expected this. Even the reporters were caught off guard. They had no choice but to change their thoughts and turn their cameras to Supreme Alliance. Logically speaking, Feng Yi, who was good at public relations, would have given them the news beforehand. But this time, not to mention news, not even the slightest rumor was released. Hence, the people in the industry were guessing that something must have happened to Qin Mo and he wouldn't be able to participate. They hadn't expected him to appear just like that. After a moment of shock, the main director gestured to the backstage. The effect of the spotlight was magnified by 1-fold. 8 screens, every single one of them showing Supreme Alliance's appearance. Behind Qin Mo stood a total of 10 players, each face familiar to everyone. Feng Shang, Coco, Lin Chentao, Rao Rong, Yin Wuyao, Lin Feng, Yunhu, Shui Yaoyao, and the youngster with silver hair. She looked like she was appearing in an esports arena for the first time, so clean and warm that it made every girl's heart race. Even though they knew her gender, the moment they saw her in the black and white uniform, with one hand in her pocket and the curve of her chin stretched, they still felt defeated. There seemed to be a faint smile on her face. The chandelier illuminated her silhouette clearly, even her pale lips seemed to glow. Whoosh! Her name appeared on the big screen, Spade Z. There was almost no need for anyone to introduce her to them. Information about her already appeared in their minds. The first Kill King of Area C had entered the enemy's camp alone. Wherever he went, not even a blade of grass grew. This was the complete Supreme Alliance. Obviously, the host's reaction was stunned. Hence, after Supreme Alliance sat down, she said, "It's so exciting, I didn't expect Almighty Qin to appear at this time. I believe the finals will be exciting. I believe the audience is just like me, we can't wait any longer. Now, may we invite all the teams to announce the lineup for the first single match." Instantly, cries of support rang out from all directions. It was as if everyone was shouting out all their enthusiasm, and even their eyes were filled with light. When Yu Cixin, who was sitting at the back of the Japanese, saw this scene, he leaned back lazily and smiled. "What's wrong? Our invincible vice-captain, do you have any good ideas to deal with Qin Mo?" "There is one." Hoshino glanced over and moved his hair aside. "Let me interact with Seymour. He'll be jealous." Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. "It's a good idea but I don't like it. Leave Qin Mo to me, what do you think?" "How long have you been waiting for this match?" Hoshino asked in return. Yu Cixin laughed. "Will I wait for the competition? Haven't you been watching Qin Mo's video from back then?" Hoshino asked slowly. "Those who don't know might think you have feelings for him." Yu Cixin stilled, straightening his back, his eyes dimming. "Do you think my prediction is more accurate or his?" "I see." Hoshino put on his wristband. "We will be fighting as a team, you and I will be fighting as a team." Yu Cixin's smile deepened. "That's what I meant." The other members of the Japanese felt a chill at the back of their neck, wondering why their captain and vice-captain were so serious today. They were actually going to fight as a team. One had to know that the vice-captain was best at solo fights. There was a legend in the esports industry that if they met the Japanese, they could just give up on the single combat. Because with Hoshino's ability, no one would be able to surpass him. What was the point of changing to a team battle? The dull-faced youth was young and curious. Watanabe caressed his chin. Supreme Alliance will probably send their important members into the team battle, which means, before he could finish his analysis, the Japanese team's individual player appeared on the screen. 2 words, Watanabe. Watanabe's face appeared in front of everyone. He arched a brow. The host added, "All right, the Japanese have pressed the confirmation button. Let's take a look at Supreme Alliance's player." North of the Yin Mountain. The two of them stood up at the same time. Watanabe's lips lifted. "Since that's the case, let me test the waters." With that, he walked up the stage, sat in front of the computer, and wore the black earpiece hanging at the side, not forgetting to glance at his fans. The shoutcasters asked, "It's rare to see such an appearance." "Indeed." The other shoutcaster added, "Honestly, I have watched many of the Japanese's competitions over the years. Under normal circumstances, Hoshino would definitely be the first to participate in such a large-scale competition. It was the same for the match against Xiangnan last year. Why is it different this year? They probably have some ulterior motives." Probably. The shoutcasters couldn't make sense of it either. On the other hand, there were people online who were asking why the Japanese had chosen such an appearance. Look at today's competition logically. Everyone knows that Qin Mo's memory loss is set in stone and his skills have deteriorated due to the memory loss. The Japanese have always respected their opponents, but if the opponent is too weak, honestly speaking, Almighty Hoshino wouldn't have come out. There are two considerations, one is to test the waters of Supreme Alliance and the other is to groom new singles players. As someone who used to play sports and have participated in competitions, this is my opinion. If you don't like it, don't scold me. This statement was supported by some people. For a moment, it really did sound like that was the case. The passers-by shook their heads. Is that Supreme Alliance? If they had known, they would have sent Xiangnan. Last year, Almighty Hoshino was the first to participate. I don't think it's wise to make guesses, let's just watch the competition quietly. What else? I don't understand why they are still participating after losing their memory. Are they that stubborn? Look at the Japanese's attitude, they are a disgrace to the Chinese. Don't mock those who are fighting at the front lines. I don't understand their arguments, they are the ones fighting for the country, not you. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.